What are subtle red flags at a job interview that say working here would suck? I brought up a company's awful Glassdoor reviews and they got so mad they ended the interview. Well, guess I dodged that bullet. This is good practice for any interview. Ask them the hard and real questions and see how they respond. It's always a disgruntled ex-employee who wasn't a team player. I know, I've asked, didn't take the job. When you ask, "What do you like about working here?" and the interviewer talks about the location of the job, it's a great place to live instead of the actual job. Tagging on to that, I saw another Redditor post to ask, "Tell me about your most successful employee in this position," and listen to what they say. Sometimes it's more telling than the straightforward cues of like hours and such. We value our employees' family time, but then when answering the cue about their most successful employee may talk about a person who stayed late all the time, etc. Means they really don't care about your personal time. This is seriously fantastic advice. This actually happened to me. Interviewer: do you have any questions for us? Me: what is a challenge this department has recently faced? Interviewer: job security. How do you even answer after that? Just, okay, and walk away? Yes, or take the gig and know it's short term if the gamble is right for you. I didn't know it at the time, but "You'll be wearing many hats" was a sign that they were going to give me the work of 4 positions and the wage of 1. I didn't last a year there before I left, and now I won't even finish reading job ads that include that line. That's a non-profit motto if I ever heard one. It's also a tech startup motto. I once turned down a job offer because they mentioned that the previous person in the position had quit after a few months, and most of the people I interviewed with seemed stressed out. I should have taken this advice, but I was so desperate to get out of retail. Mind telling us the story? You are required to wear clothing that has the company logo. You must purchase it yourself, from the company. This is illegal in most US states, unknown outside the US. Wait, really? This happened to me in Ohio. They also said I had to give it back. I didn't. You'll get full-time hours, but won't be full-time. AKA, we'll do everything in our power to avoid giving you benefits, even though we have you working more than 40 hours in a week. I once worked in a grocery store under a union hired part-time. Consistently was scheduled 40 hours a week until the 3rd week of the month, then I worked 39 hours that week. It kept them from giving me benefits. You should be considered full-time at 35 hours. I came in for a job interview at 7:30 p.m. The entire staff was still in the office. Should have known right then that 9 to 5 was not ever going to happen. One day I worked until 2:30 a.m. to finish up a big project, and my boss said to me I could come in an hour later the next morning. Gee, thanks bro. With my public transport and travel time, that gives me a solid 2 hours of sleep instead of just 1. I've come in at 4 in the morning to find people still in the office from the day before. No matter how much money is offered, I categorically tell recruiters to go screw themselves when they send me never-ending amazing opportunities. I will never go back to that life. I hate when I make an argument like this to people and their only answer is, "But it's money." I don't care about the money if I'm going to be suicidal over it. I once showed up for an interview and the manager wasn't there that day. No one called me to let me know. The assistant manager was not apologetic for the scheduling issue at all. She was literally just like, "Oh, she's not here today," in a tone that suggested I should have somehow already known that. She said that they would call me to reschedule sometime the next week. I told her I was currently unavailable Monday through Wednesday, but could come in anytime Thursday or Friday. She said if I couldn't make time for the interview, I probably wouldn't be a good fit. I said okay, and went on to my other interviews and ended up working elsewhere. You'd think that would be the end of it, but both the manager and the assistant manager badmouthed me to a few other people in the industry, including one of my friends. Hello? I made time for an interview. You disrespected me by not calling me to let me know it was canceled. I gave you the times I was available to reschedule, and that was disrespectful somehow. I would be livid. Definitely shows a complete disregard for your time. What could you do though? I've had similar situations twice over many years. The first, they apologized and explained the need to reschedule, which was fair enough, an annoying pain but unavoidable. The second, they didn't give a crap and somehow made it all my fault for them literally forgetting I was coming in that Monday, so they went on a long weekend holiday. Other than sending in a complaint, what really could be done? We don't like clock watchers here. We expect everyone to be committed. Expecting more work for no extra pay. Getting mad at you when you leave at 5 even though your stated work hours end at 5. Well then you won't mind if I come in at 9:30. You're not watching the clock after all. They don't like it when you watch the clocks. Their clock watching is only natural, of course. Everyone looks tired. Also, you don't see anyone in your department before working in it other than the boss. Making this mistake a few times was the worst job. During my last semester in nursing school, I went ahead and started applying for jobs. One was on a neuro floor, adults, at a local hospital. Interestingly enough, my own neurologist worked at that hospital. Anyway, the posting showed shift 3, 12s, which is what I wanted. I got a call to interview 2 days after applying. When I got on the floor, everyone looked absolutely exhausted. However, the part that bothered me was that no one said hi or smiled when I introduced myself. They just ignored me while I was waiting on the supervisor. I interviewed her as well as 3 other nurses on the floor. There was a desperation in their faces, and I think they were hoping this new grad would be grateful for a job. However, the supervisor told me the position was actually night shift. I explained that I could not do that for several reasons. Sleep deprivation equals seizures for me. She said, "No worries, we'll just change it to day shift. You can go ahead and start after graduation," even before I took the NCLEX. Suspicious. I got a call the next day with an offer. I actually did accept though, but I ended up changing my mind. The day before graduation, another job on another neuro floor, different hospital, was offered to me. More money and a sign-on bonus. My FIL also applied to a hospital and got to the interview, and they changed the work schedule from what it was listed as in the job posting. I don't understand that behavior, other than that they are hoping to trick people into working a schedule they didn't want. He went from a Monday to Friday 9 to 5 to alternating nights and weekends. He did not accept the job. Employees are either new hires or have been there for 15+ years with no in-between. There is no room for improvement. It's better to leave for advancement. There are 1 or 2 exceptions to this. I've been at companies where you have the 20+ year veterans who love what they do and refuse to move up, so you have a young crowd before they move up and an old grizzled veteran crowd. When you are signing all the forms they give you and you are taking your time to read over every document so that you can fully understand what you are getting into, and people come in and start telling you that you don't need to read this and that just sign here and so on. I was working with an indie game studio as a modeler and a texture artist. It was just for fun and making contacts. The game we were working on started picking up traction and had studios looking to pick us up. The lead on the project immediately got together with an attorney and drafted up contracts. Not a problem. I got mine, but there wasn't a rush, and since I had to do regular work for bills, I kind of ignored it for a couple days. The lead and his attorney started bombarding me with emails telling me to sign it. I replied, "After I read it, I'll let you know." I immediately got a phone call from the attorney assuring me it was all just standard stuff, and if I wanted to secure my position in the studio, I should just sign it. Red flags everywhere. So when I had time, I read it, and I'm glad I did. It stated that anything I worked on in my personal time, which I did a lot of as an artist, was their property, and I had no right to even show it. If I left the studio for any reason, I couldn't work in the video games industry for a minimum of 12 months. Even though I was working for free, I was not allowed to take a paid position at any other game studio while working with them. The list went on. I told them I wasn't going to sign that, and if they pressed, I was leaving. They pressed, and I left. Find later that the lead started the studio, hired people, then drained the accounts, sold the hardware, locked the doors, and never returned. Had an online interview with a company a few years ago, was interviewed by the regional manager, which seemed like a normal interview. Halfway through, he let slip that there were 6 other people from his company watching and listening in, but the software wasn't set up so I could not see or hear them. And he actually got a kick out of telling me this. It was like being on a first date with someone and finding out later she had a hidden camera on her and her parents, and 6 other family members were watching the whole time. I'm like, yeah, no, screw that noise. I know it's easy to say this stuff when it's not your reality, but I'd like to think I'd chew them all out and hang the screw up. The nerve. You can tell places to get screwed in a reasonably professional manner. I think it's an important responsibility for people to do that when they have the luxury of choosing employers, because most people don't and can't. I was once told, sometimes the hourly workers go on strike and they lock us in to keep the production line running, but management brings us steaks and we have an informal agreement with the unions so you can cross the picket lines once a week to visit your wife. The question was subtle red flags? Jumping on the not-so-subtle train here, about a month ago I interviewed for a position to run the office of a lawn or landscape company in my town. When I arrived, in-person interview, I waited at the receptionist's desk. A man wheeled out of the office in his desk chair and said to the receptionist, "Got a resume or anything for this one?" meaning me. He literally looked at my resume for the first time sitting in front of me. He then started asking questions, never introduced himself, no "Hi, how are you? Thanks for coming in," etc. He interviewed me while I was sitting at the receptionist's desk, and the receptionist sitting there working. If she took a call, he just paused until she was through. He repeatedly referred to his landscape crew as my Mexicans, and when I politely ended the interview, he said, "Well, if you want, you can call on Friday to ask if we want you back for a second interview." Bro, no. When they tell you, "What I'm paying you stays between you and me, don't discuss pay with anyone else," usually means that they are trying to pay you less than your coworkers who do the same job and don't want you to know. This happened to my husband. He had been with the company for about 2 years and they hired another employee. Told my husband he got a raise and wasn't to tell anyone else. Turns out his raise was equal to new hire pay. At my last place of work, the person interviewing me had a printed cartoon on their wall of someone who looked like a bomb had blown up in their face, with the caption, "I spoke with boss's name about it, and I guess we're still doing it." That wasn't subtle at all, but I ignored it. The boss was an absolute tyrant who wouldn't listen to her staff consider changing her mind about anything, or let people do the work that they were best suited to do. She wouldn't show up for weeks at a time. The job itself was decent, but she was the worst boss I ever had. There's a good saying, people often don't quit jobs, they quit managers. I first saw this on Reddit, and I can't agree any harder that this is an indisputable truth, but I also feel that your leaders at the top set a precedent for all staff under their charge. I was once part of a group onboarding for an IT job. They handed us all the one-page new hire contract, and everyone except me signed it immediately. When I read the paperwork, I discovered we were signing a mystery document. Clauses included, "I agree to abide by the personal search and seizure security policy," attached. Without other pages, there was no way to determine what I was agreeing to. I kept requesting more and more pages until the HR drone said, "Okay, I guess this person is just determined to hold everyone up. We will handle you separately if you're struggling so much." After I walked out and drove home, I called the hiring manager to apologize for not taking the job. He informed me that HR reported I had walked out after refusing to be drug tested. I was asked to sign a contract that gave the employer full access to my medical records. It was supposedly for drug testing, but worded badly. I signed every other page and got the job. Would have been very interesting if they felt like drug testing me, and they weren't able to do it. Maybe I'm just paranoid, but I would expect them to anyways, regardless of what you did or didn't sign. Jobs where the expectations of the position aren't clear. The person hiring you should be able to give a clear idea of your responsibilities day to day in a practical way. It shows that the company understands what it wants out of the position. I've worked a couple of positions that had a really hard time figuring out who was supposed to do what, which led to a lot of confusion, and both of them had this in the interviews. If the company you're working for can't define what success in that position looks like, you won't be able to either. I was interviewed for a job like this. When I walked into the interview, it was made clear that the job was being offered and was mine if I wanted it, on my credentials alone. It was a library supervisor job at a rare items and fine arts library. An hour into the interview, despite asking several times, they couldn't tell me what I would be doing. Slowly, it came out that there were frequent fights in the library that I would need to break up, and student mental breakdowns I would somehow have to handle as a mental health professional. The kicker was that the library held a lot of fine art, and I would need to stop people from literally stealing the Warhols. They wanted a librarian, who I guess was somehow Batman. I got an email that the position was dissolved 6 months later. Haha, sounds like you narrowly avoided being the protagonist of a sequel to Night at the Museum. Not getting to speak with who your direct manager will be. A game room or ping pong table is advertised as a perk. The blatant overuse of buzzwords about your profession is clearly written by someone with no clue. People seem tired. Not sure about the game room or ping pong table. We tend to make sure interviewees see our wall of tabletop games and Nerf gun battles. The presence of games or fun isn't a huge turnoff, but presenting it as a perk really can be. It comes off as enforced, the company mandated fun, of a very specific type. It's like the PG-rated version of we all get smashed at Jim's sports bar after work. It's pretty awkward too. Foosball and ping pong tables and board games require 2 people with a certain amount of overlapping free time. At the last place I worked in one of these game rooms, there were hundreds of people working in the building. Most of us only had 15-minute breaks, pretty strictly enforced, and they were staggered to the point where you couldn't always be guaranteed a break with your friend. Out of the hundreds of people working there, I only ever saw 4 people total ever use the games room, all of whom were pretty high up and thus weren't on the same break schedule, though most of the higher up people with longer breaks also didn't have the right schedule to use the ping pong table or play Settlers of Catan. It's not like multiple managers can just all screw off at once. That job wasn't a bad one at all, but it always amazed me that they pointed to a room full of games that I couldn't really use as a perk of the job. Even in workplaces without such strict break schedules, are there really enough people with similar interests and close enough relationships doing nothing for a long enough time to make use of all these games? The idea of Nerf gun battles at work horrifies me. Do people actually use them and enjoy that? When they feel the need to reassure you in the interview that at that company they work hard but also play hard. They don't play hard. It's a sweatshop and they're just trying to convince that it's anything but one. 100%. Work hard, play hard translates to a minimum of 50 hours a week, but you can use our games room because we totally have one. If they seem too relieved that someone actually showed up for the interview. I just had an interview last week where they showed up 30 minutes late because they weren't expecting me to show up after the first 3 hires never came to work. Tried to hire me on spot and wanted me to work in a different department than what I applied for. Makes you wonder if they told the missing hires to show up somewhere else. Maybe they're actually still working for the company in the other department. We work hard and we play hard. Translation, you will work 60+ hours a week. You will be expected to work late nights and early mornings. People will treat this job like their whole life. We'll also underpay you. It may look like a decent salary, but when you back it out to hourly, it's not even remotely competitive with industry standards. But we have kegs and a ping pong table. Also, if everyone who interviews you has been there less than 2 years, it's a sign that they can't retain good employees. Thursday night half-price appetizers at Applebee's with coworkers is your social life. It's true then, there really are some fates worse than death. When they ask out of nowhere what clients can you bring with you, I interviewed with MetLife Insurance about 20 years ago. They demanded that I provide them with a contact list of no fewer than 100 friends and family. I noped out of that quickly. Last job I worked. Yeah, everyone here is new, but it's totally because of COVID. The boss doesn't like people going out to get lunch because they're afraid you'll never come back, so bring your own lunch. You'll get weird looks if you leave on time. It was a Chinese-owned company with heavy Chinese work culture influence, so you were expected to stay overtime all week. Also, the people here are nice, but it's pretty stressful. They're afraid you'll never come back. Is so funny to me. Is the boss a dog? If they're always hiring, constant staff turnover means people quit a lot, so it must be crap. The opposite can be true as well. I worked at a place where most of the staff had been working together for over 25 years. Don't take the job. They have their jobs and work dynamic right where they want them. They will be an unbreakable clique and will be impervious to change. The bosses will have zero control of them, and you will be on the outs constantly. Been there. It is healthy for a company to have a 5-year turnover on most jobs. Yeah, I experienced this exact same thing. Went to work someplace where I was the first new hire in about 10 years. They treated me like an outsider all the time. One guy even made a point of getting a cake for everybody when it was his birthday except for me. Right in front of everyone. When I tried to join in conversations, they treated me rather cold. 0 out of 10 would not recommend it. My current boss gave me a great tip on the last interview I had. He said, ask them if you can pick an employee to chat with about how they like the position you're applying for. They'll give a better impression of the place than management. I got the job I was interviewing for. I turned it down because the above is the kind of management I want to keep in my life. Also, the place undercut the pay offer I found out, which is certainly also a red flag. I feel like that would put a lot of pressure on the employee to not say anything to dissuade an applicant and upset management. Yeah, 1, they'd never pick me to talk to you, and 2, they'd pick the person who will kiss ass and lie. Once an interviewer straight up asked me if I had any trouble working for free on weekends. I told them my free time is more valuable than anything, and that the only way that I would work a weekend is if they are paying me and I felt like working a weekend. She got really mad at me and ended the interview right away. Biggest red flag I've ever seen because they didn't even try to hide it. Since when is it legal to have employees working and not paying them? What a psycho. In America, we have the freedom to strong-arm our employees into working unpaid overtime. It truly is the land of liberty and justice for all. Do you have a strong personality? Meant everyone else who worked there were raging idiots who I literally got into massive shouting matches with and quit over within 6 months of having started. The money was good, but no thank you. Had a job like that. They said at least 5 times, if you don't have thick skin, you won't make it. City job detailed turned into everyone crapping on everyone's family. One dude was constantly made fun of for his wife leaving him. Another dude made fun of because his kid was gay. Another guy made fun of for always ending up in short relationships. I flipped crap numerous times and had to talk to HR. Decided to quit after considering following a worker home to beat the crap out of him because he'd always say, "I can say whatever I want. If I'm on the clock, I'm protected by management." The job was a freaking joke. Great pay and benefits to essentially be everyone's verbal punching bag. Ugh, just the worst. One example from mine was I was being asked to add another task onto my already huge workload and I didn't know how to do it. So I asked, "Can you please show me how to do it?" Her response, "Just do your frickin' job." I didn't do it. Then I told our general manager that these things were happening and he put us in a room together where she then lied and said she didn't. I went on stress leave a few days later, rode that out for several months and then quit. My actual manager was a great dude. He quit not long after me and gave me a pat on the back when I told them all to go frick themselves before leaving. I also went to the labor board because they hadn't paid me $4,000 in overtime. They tried to force me to sign a non-disclosure agreement and I laughed and told them to give me a check. They did. It was fricked up, but I learned a lot about myself. Thanks for watching until the end. Feel free to share some of your experiences in the comments section below. Then be sure to like this video, subscribe, and stop by the channel to check out another amazing video.